Greetings and welcome. My name is Natasha Hemmings, a representative of the 7-7 Community Warehouse. Here at the 7-7 Community Warehouse, we offer several different services for the San Bernardino community, such as feeding and clothing the homeless, family and life skills, and a reentry program for parolees. Tonight, we have a special presentation and evening with Joesph A. Bailey. Dr. Bailey is a retired orthopedic surgeon. He has written over 30 books and 1,000 journal articles, which you can find on his website at JABaileyMD.com. We thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you enjoy this presentation.
For 198,000 years, black people ruled the world. People from all ancient cultures came to Africa to learn everything. The question that has been presented to me is, what was the reason that Europeans were able to take down Africans? So the discussion will be, what was the mindset of African tradition that allowed this to happen?
The afterlife was extremely important to ancient Africans, as seen in the whole purpose of Egyptian tombs. They were quite willing to be wise and virtuous for a chance at eternal bliss, and to this end they dedicated their lives. Ancient Africans, and especially the Egyptians, were the only ones around the Mediterranean pond to hold a happy view of death. The reason for their happiness was because of their aliveness, a spontaneous, enjoyable experience of growing from the inside out.
Aliveness is a very high spiritual level. Excitement is a very low earth world level. Ancient Africans operated at a very high level.
Regardless of how each person lived life, at death each faced the weighing of Mayat's feather on Judgment Day, so as to determine the deceased's fate in the afterlife. If the heart was heavy with the weight of wrongdoings, the balance would sink. Then the she-monster Mut, eater of the dead, would immediately devour the sinful parts. But if the heart weighed less, this implied the deceased made too much of an effort to be good, using rules to judge right and wrong in oneself and others.
A fundamental difference in Europeans' approach and Africans' approach. Africans didn't use rules, they used guidelines. Now, when you have a guideline, you're able to make mistakes within that boundary, and as long as it does not disturb the harmony. Anytime you disturb the harmony, then it's time to look at what happened and change that. As opposed to Europeans, they have rigid rules that if you do anything wrong, you need to be punished for that. And so this is important. Go ahead.
Free minds of ancient Africans. Since upon their death all ancient Africans desired proceeding into the heaven afterlife, the symbol of Mayat's feather was a constant reminder to live a light-hearted life, meaning to thrive and be happy on the one hand, while avoiding any hate-filled thoughts or evil acts on the other hand. For this to happen requires possessing a free mind, the recognition and living of its owner's self-greatness, the experience of self-love, and the applying of one's talents to benefit oneself and others. What these impart is aliveness, and aliveness only favors those on the spiritual element's life course path. A free mind is characterized by a selfhood state of aliveness. By being a spiritual trait, aliveness is bubbling with the spiritual elements of unconditional love, truth, reality, and the natural. The offspring of these spiritual elements are selfhood greatness, certainty, courage, creativity.
Black youth are not taught the way that they are supposed to be taught. And for this reason, at least by the 3rd grade, all of their curiosity is beaten out of them. This is of fundamental importance, and that's why it is necessary for parents and schools to try to keep up the curiosity of the children. It's fundamental.
Its curiosity can be compared to an octopus whose soft, rubbery body is so flexible that it can crawl into crevices in rocks and reefs. The octopus has 8 long tentacles, each lined with 2 rows of suckers. Each tentacle allows it to get what it wants from anywhere, as in capturing crabs or tearing mussels from nearby rocks. Then it uses its long beak to break through tough shells, so as to rip out its food. African group mind formation. In stepping back to early African peoples' philosophical beginnings, Williams, in Destruction of Black Civilization, said Africans shared a common philosophy of life. In interweaving ancient African religion, philosophy, and social structure, he persuasively made the profound statement that one of the most significant developments in the entire history of the black race was an ancient system of democracy existing before Greece. It evolved from a continent-wide constitution that governed the whole African people as a single race. The constitutional principles and practices were held onto and carried by the migrating blacks to every part of the African continent.
This started among primitive Africans to have this constitution about God.
Even those societies that sank to barbarism held on to the fundamentals age after age, as though they were clutching the last threads of life itself. Even in Egypt, when the Asian and European impact was greatest, African constitutionalism could not be completely blotted out. It was out of this highly integrated philosophical pattern which evolved a group spirit plus a group mind equaling a group's ethos. A group spirit is present when the spiritual elements are displayed by caring, equality, and compassion.
The fundamental word here is caring. And this is what we have lost for each other. This is what we must gain for each other.
African tradition's group mind is a similarity of thinking from a shared spirituality, a shared common heritage, a common set of experiences, a common culture, and how its manifestations concern each human being, so as to thereby improve everyone's chance for surviving and thriving. Now let's look at the picture frame concept. Imagine a frame around a picture of the 55 African countries. When a given African country is compared with the other countries in Africa, there are significant variations, as in customs, language, 2,000 plus spoken by the 660 million continental Africans, and styles of worshiping God in serial religions, and even in the same region. Yet, there is essentially the same philosophy, Mayat living, and core spiritual concepts constituting the frame of all African people. An example is the law of sympathy. All God's creations and creatures are spiritually related, no matter how far removed in time or space. Put another way, the picture frame around the African continent is a metaphor that represents African philosophy.
In other words, no matter how different the Africans in their various cultures are, they share a sameness in the fundamental beliefs about how to deal with each other and how to deal with nature and how to deal with God.
The radiating vibrations out of that frame interpenetrate every aspect of all African people everywhere in Africa's 55 countries, regardless of differences in their individualized civilizations and the cultures of each. Thus, for the most part, African traditions' spirituality-oriented constitutionalism carried the same continent-wide focus which led to a certain sameness, checkered throughout their unique cultures.
When Africans were brought to this country as slaves, they were all very different, and that's one of the reasons that the Europeans would not put any two from the same country together. They had tremendous differences among themselves. That is still present today, but with the addition of the captors teaching Africans to be against each other, to disagree with each other over everything.
We're going to look at some examples of the sameness. Number one, certainty of one universal high God. Two, each human selfhood was orchestrated by its indwelling divine intelligence, the hallmark of one's real self. Three, having no intermediate authority, such as no preacher or minister or priest, to convey the truth or to act as a go-between for the human individual and the one universal high God.
There was no Bible to read. They had a Bible. Ancient Africans had a Bible from which all the world's Bibles came from. But it was every African's responsibility to connect with God directly.
Number four is showing tolerance for contrasting and even opposing views in the way fellow Africans dealt with their spirituality, as evidenced by Africans never having had any religious wars, no jails, and no policemen.
No jails. For Africans came into being 200,000 years ago. They never had any jails. They never had any policemen. That's what a wonderful people they were. They weren't against each other. They were helping each other. They cared about each other. They were all trying to get to the same place, the heaven after life.
A double-edged sword having two cutting edges refers to whatever has opposite effects, the cutting both ways, at different times or at the same time, depending on the situation at hand. Because ancient Africans shared the same type of free mind, and because they shared a group spirit centered on good character, meant they would seek every little aspect of whatever might help each of them reach the heaven afterlife.
We don't go after every little bit of information. We are satisfied to just get the gist of what's going on. That means you don't know it. If you really want to know something and you really want to excel at something, you get every little piece of information there is that you can possibly get.
They were like the octopus, crawling into academic crevices inside recesses of the unknown. They used many long tentacles of curiosity to capture possible sources that might shed light on the esoteric, the hidden aspects needed to reach the heaven afterlife. They assessed each potential source of the unknown, probing with critical thinking to break through tough shells, hoping to locate and suck out what might be spiritual food.
When I need to learn about a subject and that's very vague, I picture myself as having to go through a forest, cutting my way with a penknife, and to go all the way in the back of the forest, and then get to a cave, and then go in that cave, and then move away all the stuff, and then there's a vault, and I have to open that vault in order to pick out the lid so I can get one piece of information. When I was putting together the dwarfs, the little people, for my book at Johns Hopkins, I would spend up to 4 days trying to get 2 cases. I would drive 500 miles for 1 case. This is what you have to do if you want to be superb.
When Africans first encountered Europeans, the good key points to keep in mind about the double-edged sword were: 1, they had a life's goal to live in a manner allowing them to reach the heaven afterlife. 2, their selfhoods were powered by spiritual energy, which establishes a path to make excellence routine. 3, spiritual energy features aliveness, not emotions. That is full of curiosity, which heads anyone towards becoming a cosmic organism enhancer. 4, by them being inside and forming all decisions and solutions out of the spiritual elements, meant they were eager to seek out every tiny bit of knowledge that might help them reach the heaven afterlife. 5, African tradition promoted fellowship to friends and strangers alike, with its associated partners of trust because of kinship practices. 6, Africans' spiritual free mind possessed the confident expectations of future good from all concerned working together in order to achieve something great. The disadvantages: because Africans at the time of their encounter with Europeans were a people with a like-kind group mind and group spirit, all operating on the constructive scale of life, they were unprepared to deal with the kill, take, destroy features of the Satanist evilness of Europeans.
We've just looked at one side of the double-edged sword that has the advantages of what it takes to be a super specialist. We are now looking at that same mental practice that caused the takedown.
Africans' free minds, similar to Amerindians, found a way to welcome and trust these hypocritically friendly invaders, hoping to be offered the possibility of new sources for teaching the heaven afterlife. By being unable to challenge the starting point of Europeans' mind-controlling practices, automatically drew them into Satanist-oriented information and beliefs.
They weren't prepared to go in the direction the Europeans were trying to take them. They just had no awareness of this. This is why it's fundamentally important for you to read history, because history is today.
Let us look at this inability more closely, since it continues to apply to many of today's Black Americans on all rungs of the social ladder, who insist on being naive in the face of spotlighted contrary evidence. It is an instinct of newly hatched baby birds to believe whomever they trust because they do not know any better. Nature has designed the situation so that it is the loving parents who ensure their baby's physical nature needs are met. By being trusting and naive, they have a feeling of security, safety, and comfort. Obviously, predators who sneak up on the birds' nests are easily able to deceive them. If the babies are not killed, they are controlled.
They were totally dependent upon the captors, totally dependent, even though they hated them. But the captors supplied them with what it took for them to survive physically, even though that was inadequate, even though they didn't have the right clothing, even though they didn't have much food. It was all they had. This causes a bonding with evil people. We haven't gotten out of that.
Con artists. European con artists presented with a false goodness, plus a highly religious appearance. Besides pretending to be who and what they were not, they said what the natives eagerly wanted to hear. New concepts about the white man's religious views as part of their curiosity about what might possibly bring them future good. African leaders took whites at their word because one's word was considered sacred. Newly hatched birds show such trust by expecting their parents to drop a morsel of food into their open mouths. However, the white con artists dropped poisonous and mind-controlling substances into the open, fertile, and curiosity-filled African minds, and thereby implanted seeds of destruction. In essence, the Europeans informed the Africans that the gods Africans believed in were inferior and would cause them to burn in hell in the afterlife, and hell and Satan were made up by Europeans. The only way to prevent hell, whites continued, was through becoming subordinate to the dictates of their white god. Nothing could have been farther from the Europeans' real objectives than bringing Christianity and a higher civilization to Africa. The point was missed that Christianity started in Africa and African culture was infinitely higher than that of Europeans. Instead, the whites' real objectives were to penetrate the minds of the people for the greedy self-interest purposes of conquering African land, raping the riches of Africa, and enslaving the people to do the hard labor that would give whites the good life. European captors thereafter headed and enslaved Africans in the wrong direction, on the wrong learning track, and using the wrong thinking technique of Europeans' linear thinking. This is the track many black people are still on.